Thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the session, and we're lucky to have two speakers today. The session will run for about 1 hour, and today the focus is on hearing from two of our speakers, two educators, two researchers, in terms of how one delivers training or teaching in online environments in the context of higher education. And this comes out, this is organized through the BeyondZoom project. It's another research project that the lab here, the Research Lab, Software Engineering, Internet Technology Lab, is involved in. And the focus of this project is on how we can deliver better quality and inclusive online training in higher education, but also in VET. By the way, my name is Dr. Alexandros Gerachodis, and I'm a member of the SAIT Lab. So enough about me. Let me just welcome our speakers. We have Dr. Sonia Andreou. Hello, Sonia.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for speaking today. And we also have Professor Kola MacDonald, all the way up in Canada. Hi, Professor Kola. Do you hear us? You mean
good morning.
Good morning and good afternoon.
Yes.
Okay.
It's morning here.
So a few words. I'll say a few words. I know I've shared the bios of the speakers, but I just want to say 1 or 2 words for each before they start. So we'll start with Dr. Sonia Andreou. She's an associate lecturer at the Department of Multimedia and Graphics Arts at Cyprus University of Technology, also a colleague of mine. And she will be speaking in terms of her capacity as a lecturer at the fully online program, the master's degree in interaction design. And then we have Professor Kola MacDonald, another colleague who collaborate in different research projects, who has a lot of experience, and her research is in the area of digital education, curriculum design, and program evaluation. She has collaborated on many projects and coordinated many projects in this field, across borders, across countries, across sectors, industry, as well as education. And she's speaking more in terms of her role as a senior researcher at the University of Malta. And she will tell us a bit more about her experience. And the title of her talk is Tips for Effective Online Teaching. And Sonia's title is The Craft of Asynchronous Teaching in the Online Classroom. And I will hand over to Sonia now to go ahead and listen to her. Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, let me share my screen for you. If you cannot hear or see, just let me know. So here we are.
We can see, Sonia, thank you.
Okay, good. So the title of the presentation, as my colleague Dr. Gerachodis already said, is The Craft of Asynchronous Teaching in the Online Classroom. So my personal experience with online and in particular asynchronous teaching in higher education comes due to my involvement in the delivery of an MSc program in interaction design. So allow me to give you some context. The MSc in interaction design is offered by 2 universities, Cyprus University of Technology, where I am employed, and Tallinn University. So the idea is that this program blends interaction design, human-computer interaction, and online learning. The program equips the graduates with immediate marketable skills in design, technology, and theory as related to the domain of interaction design, user experience, and human-computer interaction. We have with us students from around 40 different countries at the moment studying online and with a strong focus on mentoring and one-to-one advising. So the MSc in interaction design can be a full-time or a part-time postgraduate, obviously, program in the domain, like I said, in the domain of interaction design. So the program is designed right from the beginning to run online and being fully online in English in order to be accessible to as many people as possible around the globe. So the course provides access to Google's online learning suite, Google Apps for education, for students internationally, and us, the instructors, obviously. We follow a combination of asynchronous and sometimes synchronous communication with a focus on asynchronous communication. Of course, this depends on the instructor and the nature of the module. So the program is generally broken down in bi-weekly sessions and assignments. The assignments can be individual. Oftentimes, they can be group work because we encourage teamwork and the idea of building a community among the students. So we have a strong preference towards group work. All course modules are provided with an emphasis on practice-based learning through research, design, and implementation of different individual and collaborative projects, like I said. So we post assignments, tips for each assignment, videos, interesting material related to the session, and we encourage the students to do the same. Oftentimes, this serves as an icebreaker between us and between the members of each class, each cohort. We also actively encourage the conversation of students in comments. We additionally schedule synchronous sessions via lectures on Google Meet, for example. We have virtual office hours for each module once a week to allow students again to have another route to access the instructor. Of course, students can schedule also meetings with us any other time if for whatever reason the virtual office hours that are predetermined are not suitable to their own schedule. So like I said, the course is designed to be flexible to the varying needs and other life commitments that postgraduate students, or like we call them mature students, have to juggle in their everyday lives. Therefore, the means of communication and the delivery of the content must be equally flexible and offering different solutions, oftentimes tailored to the needs of each student. So when thinking of our program of studies, but also generally the broader idea of online learning, especially in higher education, it would be helpful to keep in mind European Union's priorities as highlighted by the EU's digital agenda. So these are e-inclusion, as reflected by the European Commission's view on the role of digital skills, that is to empower citizens and fight the general notion of marginalization and social exclusion, including careers through education. E-accessibility, which targets the removal of the barriers encountered when trying to access and use digital media products, services, and applications. And of course, the idea of e-services themselves, which reflect the recognition of information technology as a powerful tool for accelerating economic development, whose benefits include accessing a greater user base, broadening the reach, lowering the entry barrier to new domains, as well as the cost of acquiring new audiences. So these three pillars, let's say, informed the design of MSc in Interaction Design as a program of studies. So let us now look into these domains of synchronous and asynchronous online learning. I will also, obviously, I will focus on asynchronous online learning, but let me give you a few ideas for the beginning, for the comparison, let's say. So first, we have to acknowledge the fact that both synchronous and asynchronous online learning have some core similarities, but also some unique advantages and disadvantages that one needs to account for and address, both as a learner and as an instructor, like in my case. So our colleagues from the Ohio State University have visually summarized this by presenting this figure that you can see here. So if we wanted to explain the differences and similarities of the two in just a few sentences, maybe to a prospective student, we would say that in asynchronous online classes, they will need to complete work each week on their own schedule. They will receive immediate feedback on quizzes. Although here I would add to what the colleagues have presented here, that if we are talking about assignments and no quizzes, obviously they will not receive feedback as quickly as with quizzes. They can schedule group work when it's convenient for them. So asynchronous learning, therefore, happens when the work of learning occurs at different times and in different places geographically. In synchronous online classes, they will attend classes virtually each week with instructors and classmates alike. They can participate in real-time discussion during class time and improve their presentation skills, obviously. So synchronous learning, therefore, is the kind that happens at the same time, but while the participants may be in different geographical places. For both of them, they can attend classes from anywhere, given they can access the internet and they have the means, a computer, for example. They can communicate regularly with instructors, network, and make connections with their peers, with their classmates. So now let's focus on asynchronous online learning, which is what my colleagues and I do as part of delivering MSc in Interaction Design regularly. So while listing the advantages of the asynchronous online learning in terms of its flexibility, we also need to be able to handle the possible obstacles of the method, as well as take some important decisions in terms of the content per se. This is perhaps one of the first decisions that an instructor needs to take. Asynchronous lessons allow us to bend time, in a sense, one could argue. So one of the first decisions, in my opinion, when organizing the content is whether to apply this time bending on our material. The material can have an expiration date or be what we might call evergreen. So expiration date lessons, expiration date material is designed to be watched, consumed within a specific time frame. This can be useful when you are assigning a deadline. For example, you ask students to watch a video, complete the relevant assignment, and upload it onto Google Classroom until a specified date. This can be also applied to specific events in order to build a sense of community. For example, read this article and we can discuss it during the next virtual office hour sessions or with your teammates. So lessons designed around an expiration date reinforce responsible work habits and can help us building a community where the members actively interact with each other, mainly because they have to. Evergreen content, on the other hand, is uploaded and stays there for the students to watch or read or interact with whenever they wish, as many times as they wish to. This, for example, can be great for introductory content, for reference, or something we wish our students to be able to come back to and critically review in a future stage. Certainly, though, we cannot rely only on evergreen content without adding an expiration date element, because student engagement, I have found that, well, it decreases, and the same can be said about community building, which is important in asynchronous online learning. So some of the most common pitfalls is the lack of peers presence, actual physical presence, or synchronous presence, if you will, the lack of attention from the side of the learner, and the need for constant self-discipline from the side of the learner. So let's address them. A lack of peers' presence. Without an instructor or peers present, asynchronous learning models lack a personal touch for many students. Some students are unlikely to form classroom relationships along their learning journey the way they would in a real-time learning environment, especially with physical actual presence. Lack of attention. Without people to turn to in their moment of, let's say, learning need, some students will feel that they have to navigate challenges on their own, which can be tough for a student. And like I said, it requires students self-discipline, Since asynchronous courses are individualistic in their nature, students will need to practice self-discipline regularly, all the time, to stay on top of their development. So perhaps the biggest challenge here that we face as educators is not to lose engagement with the students throughout the process. So from the side of the instructor, of the educator, there needs to be a way to assess the engagement and or the understanding of the students, or else it might feel as if you're teaching into the void, basically. On the other hand, the students might feel disconnected from the instructor and from the peers. They might watch some of the content, but choose not to engage with it. If everything is pre-recorded, they might simply wait for some answer to come up by watching the videos and without reading, watching anything that comes before or that they consider to be supplemental material. So the main idea is to have some form of synchronicity in the process, and certainly a sense of them being accountable to themselves, to the course, to the instructor, even to their own peers, maybe through group work. So let us see some practices that I found helpful. Some of them were suggestions by my colleagues, some I read about, some I gave them a try, and in a sense, it was a test for me and my students. So some of them I actually adopted quite early on and some later on in the process. So set clear objectives. Setting clear objectives, learning objectives at the start of every module gives students realistic expectations about the intended outcome. So I usually meet with them synchronously at the beginning of each module, usually during the first week of the semester, to give them some general info, read with them the pedagogical script, explain it, and also explain to them what this module is about and also what it is not about. So they have a clear idea what they are going to be dealing with and working with for the entire semester. So in this sense, they can easily track their speed, follow deadlines, and consider how effective the material is, enhancing their overall learning, e-learning experience. You should consider small-sized sessions. These are usually mature students, like I said before, busy schedules. Some of them are parents, some of them entrepreneurs, business owners. Some of them are simply looking to gain an extra degree and knowledge to help them advance in their workplace. So considering this kind of profile of our students and their lifestyles, it is better to break the content down into smaller sessions that are easier to handle. For example, in the case of our postgraduate program, like I said, we have bi-weekly sessions, 7 of them. What happens with assessments, with assignments? Having consistent assessments, assignments throughout the module enables students to keep track of what they have been learning and where their knowledge is lacking. Maybe areas they need to improve or areas they have truly mastered. Accessibility. By creating easily accessible courses, students can attend regardless of whether they are or what device they have. Mobile-friendly courses, for example, are certainly more popular among a larger group of students. Engagement and interactivity, both of those words obviously very relevant and very useful here. So adding interactive elements to an asynchronous course keeps the content interesting and inviting for students. Students are more likely to be engaged with audio, video elements, obviously, active discussions, other similar elements to that. So anything that is interactive promotes active learning better compared to long, lengthy, tedious, sometimes for them, lectures. Expressive feedback, I have found that helps a lot. Feedback needs to be consistent and constructive, obviously, at the end of every session and assignment. Instead of awarding them just a grade, it is best, I have found, to include as many comments as we can. Of course, we are all busy, but as detailed as we can make the comments, it is much better. I explain the strong parts of the assignment or the paper, whatever they have presented you with, as well as areas that they could improve in the future. So explain in detail to them, simply because we cannot have them in class face-to-face, we have to compensate for that in a sense. Resources for further reading. By giving reading suggestions, you can support students in their journey outside the module. So providing specific links, maybe also make it easier for them to explore in their own time. And then, like I said, online discussions, forums, chats, virtual office hours, different solutions like that, different outlets for them to be able to communicate with you and with the peers. And let's see some specific tools. Like I said, videos, they are powerful for facilitating learning. The combination of visual and audio cues, as we know, enhances a learner's overall experience. Performance support aids. Synchronous learning, like I said before, makes us should make use rather of performance support aids like checklists, maybe how-to guides, curated links, PDFs, anything that allows the learner to easily revisit the knowledge they need for their work at hand. Oftentimes, we can also have some recorded lectures. They can be good for learners to get acquainted with their instructors without meeting in person, especially if they are for introductory, for some introductions about specific topics. Why not? Blogging encourages learners both to express their views on a topic as well as to learn from another point of view, maybe their classmates, for example. You could also have a digital library, having an online collection of audio, video files, ebooks, anything that the learners can turn to and choose to look at in their own time and study further, maybe. Presentations. While learners are not meeting in person, they can still give presentations online in order to discuss content with their peers, even compare notes in a way, discuss, and see where they are at the moment in terms of their own learning process. Discussion boards I have mentioned before, and assignments, quizzes, tests, group work. While feedback might not be immediate when it comes to assignments, providing consistent and regular feedback, like I said before, still helps learners immensely. They should always have an idea where they are standing in terms of the course and what they can do to get better, specific ideas by the instructor. So they are certain, they are not left on their own devices for a long time, because then usually I have found that they lose focus, they lose interest. So as a closing remark, we can say that because of its flexible nature, asynchronous learning offers many benefits for the learner, for the students. As more and more people work from home, we have seen that asynchronous learning emerged as a better fit for those people who are employees, who have families, who are studying part-time, who are mature students oftentimes. At the same time, asynchronous learning can also be combined with some synchronous methods, some synchronous elements to create this idea of blended learning, this blended learning approach that meets a more diverse range of learning needs oftentimes. So learning to strike a healthy balance between both worlds. Of course, like I said, I am leaning more towards asynchronous method, but still I am using some elements of synchronous online teaching methods. In this sense, this can help us keep up with the continuous needs for upskilling. And like this quote here that I have says, online teaching, whether synchronous or asynchronous, requires a measure of dissolving the screen between us and the learners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. That was a very nice talk, interesting talk. We have some minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to take some questions from the participants. I'll ask if anyone has a question, then I'll save my questions for the end if there's time. So I'll first give an opportunity for any of the participants. If anyone has a question or a comment for Sonia, we have it now to ask. let me start. Maybe someone will think of something. Okay, so thanks a lot, Sonia. I think from my side, you emphasized at some point in the beginning about the importance of group work in an asynchronous course like this. Perhaps you could give us an example of what this looks like in, maybe from your courses, what a group assignment might be, or how many students does it involve, considering they're all in different parts of the world and different time zones, and how does it work?
So let's say that we have a module entitled research methods. So you give them 2 weeks to work on a specific topic or on a specific article, and list down all the ethical issues, ethics that they can find in the specific articles, how the authors address those issues, what could have been done differently, etc. So in order to, I guess, get different views on ethics from different perspectives, you might suggest group work. So in this sense, what I usually believe is best is for them to decide who the group mates are going to be, simply because they know their own time zones. They are encouraged in this sense to talk to one another, to discuss possible solutions in terms of meeting in their own private times, having discussions among their peers. So in this sense, they are left on one hand freely to choose 2 or 3 people. That's, for me, that's maximum. This is how it works, because then it gets super complicated, in my opinion, if it's more than 4 max people. So you give them, on one hand, this liberty to choose who their teammates are going to be, but then on the other hand, they are still operating within specific limitations. They have 2 weeks, they have a specific topic to work on. So you get, in my opinion, the best from both worlds. You get the idea of flexibility from asynchronous online learning, but then you also get the idea of community, of group work, of meeting face-to-face, in a sense, through a screen with the classmates that they choose to work with, that their schedules do not collide in any sense. But this is all done in a controlled environment with specific parameters. So in this sense, they are not lost in different time zones and real life schedules, etc. That would be
Thank you, Sonia. I don't know, does anyone else have another question? We can take another question before we move on to Kola's talk. Any other questions? Okay, then I will take it. Sonia, I have another question. You pointed out how important it was to get feedback from the students, and you had a slide or 2 there where you were showing us, shall I say, some of the problems or some of the areas where we see things could improve. Yeah, the pitfalls, let's say. How do you gather this information? Do you do an assessment at the end of the course? Do you speak with the students? Do you get like individual comments? And how easy is it to implement some of this feedback in the following year, let's say?
Well, there are 2 ways. The first one is while the module is running, you get their comments, because the majority of them, like I said, they are mature students. So usually if something bothers them or collides with their schedule or creates for them an actual issue, they will email you, they will let you know, especially if you create from the beginning this, like I said, group community environment. Then the more formal way is that at the end of each module, so each term, they have to hand in a questionnaire, which is both qualitative and quantitative. So in this sense, we get answers from them both on a scale, like a Likert scale, for example, so we can measure satisfaction, but then we also get actual comments from each of them, or at least the majority of them. And then, of course, you go through a process of reviewing those comments. And to be fair, the majority of the comments and changes can be implemented. So if it's anything that has to do with the way that the content is organized, or something that would help them in assignments, or some content that I could add that they would find helpful, or something that they found confusing and we could rephrase or change a little bit. All of those things can, or if they need more synchronous sessions one-on-one, like mentoring, for example, anything like that can be changed. And we are hoping that we're getting better each year.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Kola now. Kola, you can take the floor and go ahead.
Okay, I'll share my screen then. Okay. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see and hear you, Kola.
Okay. All right, welcome from Canada. Nice to meet you all. I'm going to talk about e-learning. I've been involved in e-learning. I designed my first course in 2002 in the Faculty of Education at the University of Ottawa in Canada. So I've been teaching online for over 20 years. I was in the beginning, it was very difficult. Students didn't want to change. They found it was a lot of work to not only learn the content of the course, but also to learn the technology. 20 years later, that's totally changed. Students usually feel very comfortable with technology, and often more so than the students. So the course I'm going to talk about or use as an example, I've taught in undergrad, I've taught in grad courses at university, I've taught in training courses with the World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders, and in the Faculty of Medicine and in training. But the course I'm going to use as an example is a course I developed as part of our Dig It project, which is an Erasmus grant with 5 countries, including Cyprus, Slovenia, Italy, and Finland. And so it's a course for professors to teach them how to teach learners online. So that's the course I'm going to refer to, but I'll be talking about my general knowledge of teaching online over the past 20 years. So the first tip I would give you when designing or delivering or evaluating e-learning is, if you can, do a needs analysis. For this course, the one in the Erasmus grants, we did a needs analysis at the University of Malta. We ran 3 focus group interviews with 24 academic staff from 6 faculties to find out what they needed and what they wanted with regards to e-learning. This was done back in 2016. And at that time, even though I've been teaching online for almost 20 years, University of Malta was still very far behind, and there was a lot of anger towards the idea that they would have to change. It was almost like what I experienced earlier at the University of Malta. Anyway, we wanted to understand, and if you can, even an informal needs analysis. I've done it when designing in-service training with doctors, and it's very interesting because doctors wanted different things than, say, professors. They wanted it quick. If they can read it, they rather read it than watch a video. And so doing a needs analysis means that you can give the learner what they need, what they want, or both, and also It just means the first iteration of your course will be much more successful. Most of the online learning I have designed has been very successful. And one of the main reasons is I usually do a needs analysis. In the case of this course, it was fairly extensive because it was supported with a grant. But even in a course in a university, I may do an informal one. If I'm teaching face-to-face, I may give a little survey before I turn it to online to ask students what they need and want. So when I interviewed the professors in 2016 at the University of Malta, I found they needed training, and they wanted in-service training and support to help them make the transition. So we designed at first a 6-module course called Designing, Delivering, and Evaluating Effective Study Units. We taught it once. We found out they found it overwhelming. We then changed it from 6 modules to 9. So evaluating your course and finding out what's working, what's not working is a second tip. And Sonia also mentioned that. So this is a 9-module course that we designed to teach professors. The second thing in our Erasmus grant, one of the outputs was designing digital education framework, quality standard framework. So to do this in our grant, we did an extensive review of the literature on 5 different platforms to find out the existing frameworks and models for effective e-learning that already existed. We made we had an extensive review of literature with thousands of articles. We read the abstracts, we limited it down. We found, I think it was 33 articles that had frameworks that were related to e-learning. We took the best of each and we designed our own to try to make a better one. So this is called the European Union Digital Education Quality Standard Framework. And so the variables in it are content. You need to have effective e-learning, you need effective content, and there's sub-variables that relate to that. You need delivery service, you need a community, you need structure, and you need outcomes. And I'll talk more about the framework later, but this is an interactive framework. So if you mouse over these variables and sub-variables, the definition will emerge. So it is not a step-by-step process on how to design effective e-learning. It is a theoretical framework to guide the design, delivery, and evaluation. So reading through the definitions, reading through the operationalized terms will give you a lot of information on how to ground your quality framework. And it also will help you deliver it and evaluate it. And I'll show you this interactive model in a few minutes. So from the course I'm going to show you, and all my courses align with the framework. The framework guides them. It's a quality standard. It makes them easier to evaluate it. So the variables are at the top of this table: content, delivery, support, structure, communication, and outcomes. These are directly pulled from the framework. And so what we did here is we have 2 modules on content, 2 on delivery, 1 on support, 1 on structure, 1 on community, and 1 on outcomes for 9 modules. So if you see under content, create course description and learning outcomes, writing effective learning objectives, repurposing classroom content into online content, and finding and uploading available online resources. So that's what you have to do when you think about the content of designing your course. And the same for delivery, support, and I'm not going to read the table to you, but you can have a copy of this presentation and read it so that you know exactly what each of the variables and sub-variable means. For example, outcomes means ensuring the learner's learning outcomes are met, designing effective assessment, assessing your learners, and also evaluating your course. So this is a really helpful table to really understand what you need to do for each of these variables, and you can read over it yourself on your own. So for this course that I'm using as an example to talk about tips, we've now taught it 5 or 6 times. The first time we invited 2 people from each of the partners in our Erasmus grant to participate in it. Everyone else was from Malta. After our partners from the Erasmus grant took the course, we gave them the course and asked them to teach it. So this course has now been taught in 5 countries, and it's been taught at the University of Malta several times. The first time We had a large dropout rate, but since we improved it, we now have almost no dropout rate. There's usually a waiting list to take the course. I'm beginning it again, I think for the 7th time in Malta tomorrow. There are 31 people registered, and so it's really been helpful, especially after the pandemic. There's a real demand for this course because people want to learn how to transfer their face-to-face courses into online courses. Any graduate from this course, so now we have a total of 250 graduates from this course. After the next iteration, there'll be almost 300. People who graduate from this course, we developed a second course in our Erasmus project called Train the Trainer. It's 3 modules, not 9, so it's much shorter, much less intensive. And graduates, it extends and complements the 9-module course. And graduates from the Train the Trainer course become champions in their department or faculty. And we are developing incentives to get them to take the course and to support their colleagues in transitioning from face-to-face to online courses. We're now in a new grant application. We're trying to get this course, this 9-module course, extended to a course for Bachelor of Education. So students who are becoming teachers will have taken a course designed to teach them to teach effectively online. And hopefully they can be, as part of their program, after they've taken the course, they can become teaching assistants to professors and help get experience teaching, and also help support professors, because they're often more comfortable, and often professors that are transitioning don't need the 9-module course. They just need a question answered or someone to drop in their office and do a demonstration. So hopefully if we get the grant, this 9-module course will be part of the faculty of, will become a course, a credit course in the Faculty of Education and also computer science. So the biggest tip I can give you for teaching online is to use a roadmap. And a roadmap is what I have students go to start their course. First of all, I'm going to take you to the framework and show you the interactive model. So this is the framework I showed you earlier. So this is the European Union Digital Education Quality Standard Framework. It's published online. We just did videos in 6 languages: Maltese, Slovene, Greek, the 6 languages, English and Finnish. And there will be a 5-minute video linked to this, and it will explain how to use the framework. As I said, it's not a step-by-step process. The course, the 9-module course, is a step-by-step process. This is a theoretical framework, but if you mouse over, for example, outcomes, the definition will emerge. What does it mean to have effective outcomes? So you can read that. And these are the sub-variables. So transfer of knowledge is one. If you click on that, you can read the definition. So all the variables and sub-variables are operationalized, and there is an article published on this, the development of the framework, and you can get the article and read it. And also you can play with this framework and read all the definitions. And in the article, there's a table with the operationalized terms in it. The other thing that's in this framework is a toolkit of evaluation tools to evaluate programs and modules or sessions that use the framework. So there's, for example, a temperature check. A temperature check is a short survey that takes about 5 minutes to complete. And it basically, we get learners to do this after 3 modules to give us an indication of how the course is going, to let us know, do we need to make quick changes? Are there little problems that we can catch before they become big problems? So this is a Likert scale question. It's very short. And we use this to get information early on. And it also has 2 open-ended questions. And this is a tip. If you're going to ask open-ended questions, these are the only questions I really need to get the best information. What is working for you in the course, and how can the course be improved. So we give this little survey early on so that we can get feedback early on and make any changes to the course that need to be made. Now, what I have found is that the first time I taught the course, this was really useful and I made changes. For example, I found students were overwhelmed and I reduced the number of assignments. Now that I've been teaching so often, I almost know what to do, or I've made so many mistakes and learned by trial and error that I almost need to make no more changes. So I still give the temperature check, but I rarely find that I need to make changes after I've learned so much from it. Now I need to get out of here. Okay. So this is the framework that I mentioned. I invite you to go to the link that is on the in the slide presentation and play with this to get information. It also will guide your delivery and your evaluation of the course. So this is a tip to get quality effective learning, is to use a framework as a guide to design and evaluate it. Okay, so some of the different tips that we use is we give step-by-step guides on how to do things, how to create a video, how to make a posting. We also have a question and answer forum that students can quickly post a question, and we invite learners to also answer. So usually if someone posts a question, the answer is the response is quick by either me or a student. Often the answer is in the syllabus or in the roadmap and someone just missed it. So usually a student can answer the question. Another tip is I do not allow learners to email me unless it's personal. So what I found when I started teaching online, I would get a lot of emails, often the same question from 5 different learners. I spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes answering the same question. So now if learners have a question about an assignment, about the syllabus, about anything about the course, I ask them to post it. In the first face-to-face class, I make this really clear. Do not email me unless it's personal. My grandmother died, I'm going to miss a session, or I'm very ill, I need an extension. Something personal, you can email me. Anything about the course, anything about an assignment, anything at all, you must post, because likely several students have the same question and it can be answered quickly. So if you can end up spending an hour a day answering emails, don't do it. Save yourself time. No emails. I find I get almost no emails in my course, maybe 3 a term, 3 a course, rarely, sometimes none. So that's one way to save time. Another way to save time is in your discussion group. If you have 30 learners, my courses, I divide the learners into 3 groups of 10, so that when they post and they need to read all the posts of their colleagues and respond, they don't have so much reading to do. That was one of the biggest complaints when I started teaching online. It takes too much to read the discussion and post. So another tip is divide your groups into groups. So group 1, 2, and 3, and they only need to read and post in their own group. They're welcome to read all 3 if they don't have a life, but most won't. And so have them divided. You need to read all groups and answer to all groups, but they don't. So that will be something that will save the learner time and will make them happier. So the other thing I do is when they have assignments, I will give them a list of tips of common errors that learners before have made. So here's a bunch of tips. Make sure you do this. Be careful not to do this. Example. So usually their first assignment is much better. Another tip is I ask learners who do a good example of their job, of their assignments, if I can use their assignments as e-samples. And for every assignment, I have a half a dozen or more e-samples of good assignments. You don't get that in a face-to-face class. So they can go on and see what's expected and use these assignments to understand expectations. When I find sometimes learners have said, well, isn't that spoon feeding them? No, I don't think so. When learners feel comfortable, when learners understand what you expect, they'll take bigger risks and do better assignments. It saves you time because the first draft of their assignment is better than it would be if they didn't get the tips and they didn't get the e-samples, and it saves them time and frustration. So, oh, I'm going to go to the roadmap. Back to the roadmap. So I showed you that this is the roadmap. These are the variables again from the framework, content delivery service, community, etc. Explains what the roadmap is and why we do it. Now the roadmap has each week. Usually we only open it 1 week in advance, so they can't get too far ahead. So each module or each session has clear learning outcomes or objectives listed. So here by the end of this week, you will. They're very clear. They start with a verb. They make it clear what's expected. So first thing they see in the roadmap is the learning outcomes for that module, clearly stated. Then they have each of my courses or each of my sessions is divided into 3 sections. Read it, where there's links to everything they need to read. So it's very convenient. All the links are here. Apply it. That's where they, after have read the content, they apply. There's activities to apply the theory in practice. And what I do here is I make sure it's something they want for in this course. They design the first module or the first session of their online course. So through the 9 modules, every week we do something. The first module, we develop the learning outcomes. The next module, we develop the content. The next module, we find resources. So it's very practical. So they're motivated because they're getting something they want. And same with my learners. If it's a teacher ed course, they develop learning outcomes or lesson plans they can use in their classroom. If it's an engineering class, have them do something that they want to do, that's their idea, that's practical. So it helps them motivate it and it helps them make it more useful. So they read what's necessary. It's convenient online. The first is an e-doc, which is all my examples and talks about what they need to do and why and the theory behind it. There's also extra readings that give them the supplementary content. And then there's a discussant where after they've read it and they've done their assignments, they go online and there's a question or two, a probe that they need to answer. And I also, another tip is I have a participation mark. Sonia mentioned it, one of the downfalls is that participation. A couple of tricks for that is I track the learners. After a week or so, I go online, there's a tracking, you can find out if they've logged on. If they haven't logged on yet, or they haven't spent any time, I email them and I say, I notice you haven't logged on yet, or I message them. Is there any problem? They realize they're being watched. Often that will eliminate the problem. They come on and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I've just been busy. And if they still don't show up, I'll email them again. I notice, it's been 8 days since you've been on last, or you haven't logged on yet. Is there any issue? Participation is part of your grade. And then if they still haven't logged on, I'll suggest maybe it's too busy. Maybe you should drop the course or whatever. But usually just letting them know they're being watched is one trick in getting them to participate. The other is I always have a participation mark in, so they're, I use a rubric and they have to post and they have to respond to their partner or their colleagues' posts. And if they don't, they will lose. It's a small amount of even a 5% percent of a mark or 10% is a grade. It makes a difference between an A and a B, or a B and a C, or a 8 and a 9 if it says stay 9. So these are a couple things I do to increase participation. So in each session, so for example, if you go to module 2, again, you have the learning outcomes, you have read it, apply it, discuss it. So in here, checklist for writing outcomes. So anything they click on, there are useful resources that they can click on and read and use. So there's all kinds. That's another thing that Sonia mentioned, have useful resources. This is full, 20 years full of resources that I've created, or my grad students that were teaching assistants created for me. And that I can't get out of here, sorry. That we use to get, so they different, to help them learn to teach online. So when they go to the discussion forum, they can tips for, here's a tip thing. So here, the big picture, tips for this week's task. So here I give them exact examples of what they need to do based on what learners have done in the past. Learn with and from others, sharing knowledge. So little tips and things for them to learn from each other. So everything is at their fingertips. Everything is well written. Everything is well planned. So it's very easy and convenient. So this roadmap is one of the things that my teachers find most helpful. The learners know everything that they're expected to do in every module at their fingertips. They have everything they need to read, they have and discuss and post. So here's one for guidelines with voiceover. So there's a lot of different resources here, examples of how to do it step by step. So there are very few questions. Sometimes we will offer them a face-to-face session or online. So tonight or Wednesday night at 8 p.m., there's going to be a voluntary session. And what I find is very few show up, or they'll come in the last one question. Because of the question and answer, they can ask their questions so quickly and get their answers so quickly. If I offer a face-to-face, if it's face-to-face, usually no one shows up. They think they miss face-to-face learning, but they don't miss it enough to get in their car, drive to campus, get a babysitter, get parking. So when you offer it, they don't miss it that much. Even if it's online and convenient, very few show up. It's usually me just sitting there for an hour, you know, waiting for people and that don't show up. So I get no emails, almost no emails. And if I offer face-to-face, they basically don't need it or want it. So this roadmap is one of the best tips I can give you. It just, learners love it. There's no confusion. And one of the biggest problems with e-learning is that people get lost. But with the roadmap, and I also have a syllabus because the university requires it, but it's mainly the roadmap that they use. So, shut that. And moving along. We talked about that. Sometimes we have phone calls if they have technical issues one-on-one. But again, because of all these step-by-step documents that we've created over the years, there's very few. We evaluate each course with a temperature check and 3 or 4 modules in and a final summative evaluation. The summative evaluation doesn't help with the course you're teaching, but it'll give you information on how to improve the next iteration. These are some of the comments we got from the course that I pulled out. Just to read a couple, especially the roadmap is something I will use in my future teaching and learning with students. An e-sample very quickly gives you an objective of where you want to arrive and is very effective. That was super helpful. I definitely took a lot of useful tips from this course. I saw a lot of things I could improve in my own courses, nice touches, like how to get participants more involved, how to support them, and tips in keeping them motivated. The learning objectives were spot on. The course was very well structured and the content was based on an applicable knowledge, etc. So you can read through those on your own. This course was accredited at the University of Malta by the Program Validation Committee in 2019 with 2 ETCTs. The course was evaluated and the findings published in a referee journal. It's been taught in 5 different countries, and it won an honorable mention in an international e-learning academic awards program in 2020. So just a couple of things to remember. A climate of respect is really important, so learners learn with, from, and about each other. Having a learning community is important, so we always have them develop a learner profile where they put a picture of themselves, where they put things, you know, with their faculty, their research interests, something personal about themselves, if they have children or a dog or like to cook or like to hike. So we give them some guidelines. So everybody has a learner profile. The first week we have them read the profiles and respond to one another just to develop a learning community, which is really a prerequisite to effective e-learning. We have different tips to get them to active participate. We get them to share their pros and cons of learning experiences. We make them assignments practical and useful. The course is so practical and needed, and of course the pandemic helped me with this. It's usually oversubscribed. And in conclusion, some of the tips are, if you can do a needs analysis, use the framework as a quality standard, at least read through it and understand what's important to design effective e-learning. Evaluate your course. If you can, use the temperature check, borrow hours, adapt it, use a roadmap. Have resources, have e-samples. You may not be able to have e-samples till you've taught the course once. Ask your students. They've never said no to me. They're very flattered when I ask to use their assignments. I also put their name on it, so it's sort of a publication for them. Divide your discussion groups in groups so they're smaller and save learners time. Don't allow them to email you unless it's personal. Track your learners and email them if they're not participating. Have a pub. The thing in discussion groups that I found is learners started to post things that weren't useful. Like sometimes they'll just say, I agree, or good point. I explained to them not to do that. That's not helpful. You know, unless it's something that adds value to the conversation, don't post. And also don't post if it's something you know a lot about. 1 week you might want to post a lot, like 2 or 3 times, but don't post after every comment. It's like someone being in the face-to-face class and talking too much. It can be annoying. If it's not adding value, don't post. You should be able to post once every week. Give them some standards and expectations. But there may be a week you have nothing to say. So you know, it's not really helpful to try to post something just to impress us, but there shouldn't be too many weeks you have nothing to say. So 1 week, maybe 2, but you should post once every week. It should be a substantial post that adds value. If not, don't post, I agree, don't post yes or good point. It has to be something that extends the conversation. And so give them a template of what you expect. And if they're not posting, you would have to follow up. Always ask the 2 questions. What's working? You don't need to say what's not working, because if you do, you need to say, how can it be improved? Which will give you the same answer. I used to have both, but what's not working and how can it be improved were redundant. I'm trying to think of other things. I think I'm almost finished. Are there any questions? I always, like Sonia, I have office hours, but no one ever shows up because I'll have them once a week, but I don't need them because it's organized. The question and answer, usually answer the questions. Once in a while, someone will have a technical issue where they need some help, but basically the question and answer replaces office hours. So I am done. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Kola. There was some very interesting and many tips shared there by you through all your experience. So as Kola has mentioned, or are there any questions from the audience before I have a couple of comments and questions myself? So the floor is open. We have about another 5 to 10 minutes. Let me go ahead. Having done this course of yours, Kola, which was very helpful for me as an academic. With the e-samples, I agree very much with some of the testimonials there that they were very helpful and give you a great example of what you're requesting from, and then it's easy to draw from one's experience and adapt your answer to your assignment and so forth. But my question is more about, through all those years of experience, you have seen it all, you've been through the different stages of e-learning, and you've created all those units, the 9 modules, let's say, which cover the most important topics that we as instructors or academics should know about teaching online and evaluating our teaching and designing our content. How often do you have those new modules been added? I mean, are we at a point where you think soon there will be new models as e-learning is changing? How often do you add a new module to that? And do you see any new modules very soon coming up into this course of yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. We did add a new module about 3 years ago, or no, yeah, I guess we developed it, and we did add a new module on based on our review of literature for this grant, and it was the one on community. So answer your question, yes, we do. Do I think we need more new modules? Yes, I do. And they would be based on the writing the proposal and doing the research that we just did with you. I think we need one on inclusion, diversion. What was the other thing we talked about? I can't remember, I'm blank, but based on how e-learning is changing and what grants are calling for, I think we need module on diversion and inclusion. And there's something else too, but I can't remember what I'm thinking.
Equity, I think.
And in our extended course, the Train the Trainer, we had one on technology, and we have one on pedagogical theory, and gosh, I can't remember the third module. So yeah, you can't put everything about e-learning in one course probably, but if we extend this to a course for undergrad or accredited course in university, I think we will add, I think most university courses are 13 modules, not 9. So I think we can add modules on inclusion, diversion, pedagogical theory, etc. Absolutely, I think we need to continually improve.
Okay, thank you. I have another one more question, and obviously you've seen it all since the beginning, and especially in academia, when you came across professors that were not open to this change and were being forced to learn about it, to transfer their lectures in online environments, how did you deal with them? How do you deal with people that are not open to this change and are being forced to do it and being professors and all?
That's a great question. I was invited to I went to Malta on my sabbatical in 2016 as a volunteer. And that was the year I did a needs analysis to find out what they wanted and needed, because they were way behind in e-learning. And when I talked to professors, there was anger in the room. Now there's been a huge change since I've been there. I don't feel that anymore, especially after the pandemic, when they didn't have any choice. You either teach online or you don't teach, and the university will shut down. how did I deal with it? You have to be careful. When people say what some of the arguments were, well, our face-to-face learning is so good, and online learning is not as good, and the learners will cheat. These were some of the comments I heard in 2016. And so I had to just sort of listen and sort of say, and even the rector, when I went, sort of had his arms crossed. He thought I was going to tell them that everything should be e-learning. I don't think everything should be e-learning. I don't think e-learning is a panacea. I think there's a need for e-learning for a certain segment of the population. I think, for example, graduate students where they work all day and they want to do it at night, or they don't want to get a babysitter or drive or park. I think for undergrad learners to take one course, maybe a semester, or one course a year is a good idea. So they're familiar with technology when they graduate and teach in schools or work so they have experience. But I think the social of face-to-face in undergrad is really important. I don't think now, and then if there's a pandemic, then of course you need it. So there is a time and a place for e-learning. I don't think it's a panacea, and this is what I communicate. I'm not saying that e-learning is the best thing for every situation, and with some skills for, operating skills, etc., it's better face-to-face, although we've done it online. So I empathize with them, first of all, and I do talk about the stages of transition. I often use death and dying, the stages of death and dying. First, there's denial, and then there's bargaining, and the pros and cons of e-learning. But the thing I have to point out to them is our face-to-face learning is not as good as we like to think. If you go to learners and into their classroom, and universities always talk about being innovative and cutting edge, and you go into the classroom, often you'll see a professor at the front of the room and learners in rows, and the professor's using cutting edge 1980 technology, PowerPoint slides, and it's not cutting edge. And often they're being given information like history, which the learner can Google and find out more efficiently and faster the answer to. Why does a learner need to drive to campus to have that kind of information? So now we're using the flipped classroom, where the learners can read first and come to the classroom and do hands-on activities, and which is much better. But often learners are bored to death. And when I started teaching 30 years ago, I could stand in front of the room and give them experiences and give them practical ideas and tell them stories and make them laugh and use humor and use practical ideas. It changed over my 20 years of teaching, so that they all had a phone in their hand and or a computer. They all have this shield. I like to think they're typing what I'm saying, but probably they're shopping, or they're probably texting each other, or working on their assignment for the next class, or whatever. So the assumption that face-to-face is better because it's face-to-face is, I think, outdated and wrong. I think learners are often very bored with face-to-face learning, the way we teach it. So I have to point out some of these things to sort of get them to realize. And also the fact that, finally, what really changed e-learning was when the administration realized they were losing market share. Learners were taking, if there was no graduate course in Malta, they were taking their grad course online at another university, or so they were losing market share to those that were teaching online. And learners weren't coming to them from other countries because they didn't have programs. So once administration comes on board and offers courses and support and incentives, professors slowly became more open to it. And there's just peer pressure. Like, learners want more flexibility. Learners want more convenience, especially a grad course. But I think even when I taught undergrad, the first time I taught it was a curriculum course, and we offered it. There were like 9 different modules of the course. Only one was offered online, mine. This is a long time ago. And learners that took the online course, remember, they're face-to-face and all their other courses are face-to-face. They were so glad to have one course online. So one morning a week they could stay home, or one morning a week, they didn't have to come to campus or whatever. So now they all volunteered to take it. So that makes a difference. And eventually now all of those courses are online. So learners do get one of their courses online in their undergrad program. So those are a few of the things we've done. Offering support is one way, offering continuing education courses and giving them incentives. We're trying to get incentives so that they can, it's considered in promotion but that's a tough one. We never were able to do that at the University of Ottawa, but we're trying to do that at the University of Malta, where professors that do take risks and do teach online are given some time, maybe a course reduction, or the term they design the course, they might be given one less course to teach. The other thing is too, when I talk about time, it does take a heck of a lot of time to design an effective course. There's lots of tricks to that. You don't need to design everything on your own. There are a lot of free resources online. The first time you teach it, it takes forever to design it. There's no getting around that. But after the first time you teach it, I would argue it takes no more time and maybe less to edit it and revise it the second and third and fourth time you teach it. No more time than a face-to-face course. So those are some of the things I did. You can't jam it down their throat and you can't make them do it. But the other thing is to convince them of the benefits. They don't need to drive to campus. You can be in your pajamas and teach. You can have a glass of wine or a coffee while you're teaching. You don't need to get parking. You can be at a conference in another country. You can be on holidays and teach. So once you go through the blood, sweat and tears of designing your course, it has been very helpful to professors, gives you much more flexibility and convenience for yourself. Plus you look more innovative and creative. Yeah, convincing them that there are benefits for them as well is another way.
Great, thank you. We have a question here from Liesel. I'll just read it out. Thank you for the presentation, Professor. Can you, one second, just see it. Can you share your lowest and highest class total you have had to teach to date?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'm lucky. Don't think I've ever taught one of those big classes or I think maybe 40 might be the most. The other thing is too, I give a lot of feedback and I give it fast. Students are often surprised at how much feedback I give them and how fast. So that's another quality standard that I do. Yeah, 40 or 42 would be the largest class I've taught online.
Thank you. And if there's any more questions, either for Sonia or Kola, we can take one more question. If there is, otherwise, I think we are done for today. Okay, let me just take one last look here if there's any questions. Okay, with that, then I want to thank Professor MacDonald and Dr. Sonia Andreu for those two great talks. We are lucky to have you here today, taking your time out and discussing what you've discussed. I want to thank the participants for joining us today. And with that, I will end the session. I can give a last word for you, for each of the speakers, if they want to say something.
Well, thank you, Alex, very much for inviting us, for having us here with you. And like I said before, I think that the biggest challenge is to sort of attempt to dissolve the screen in a sense, but on the other hand, keeping all the benefits and the positives that this screen provides our students with. So that's a tricky line we walk. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Professor Kola, anything else, or can I
No,
close?
nice to meet you, Sonia. Nice to meet you, everyone. Thank you very much. My pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.